They say behind every powerful man is a strong woman. But nobody was standing behind Indigo that night. Power that stops listening becomes a door left open, and the wrong people always find unlocked doors. Now, let's talk about Indigo Crane Colombo, and the night everything she thought she understood about her marriage got rewritten in one terrible hour. The anniversary plate sat on the kitchen counter of the old Colombo Social Club. Ceramic, hand-painted, two doves facing each other. The one Indigo had commissioned from a shop in Little Italy 8 months ago, back when she still believed Ignazio would be home by 7. It was now 9:43. She hadn't moved the plate. She'd told herself that was optimism. By now, she knew it was just stubbornness. Indigo pressed one hand flat against the curve of her belly. 6 months along, round and insistent, and exhaled slowly through her nose the way her midwife had taught her. "Don't let stress become a second heartbeat," the woman had said. Easy advice for someone who hadn't married into the Colombo name. The social club kitchen smelled like garlic and old wood and decades of Sunday dinners that had nothing to do with her. She'd chosen it for their anniversary, because Ignazio always said this kitchen was where his family became a family, where his grandfather had fed half the neighborhood during lean years, where deals were sealed with espresso instead of ink. She thought it would mean something to him. She thought a lot of things that year. Her phone showed 4 unanswered texts, and one call that had rung out without even reaching voicemail. That meant his phone was either off or deliberately silenced. Ignazio Colombo did not accidentally silence anything. She picked up her wrap from the chair. Ivory fabric, anniversary white, chosen carefully, and decided she was done waiting. The back door of the kitchen opened onto a narrow alley that connected to the club's private courtyard. She'd used it a dozen times. 2 of Ignazio's men were supposed to be posted at either end. The alley was empty. Not quiet. Empty. No cigarette smoke. No low voices. No shuffle of dress shoes on wet pavement. The kind of empty that didn't happen by accident in a Colombo property. Indigo stopped walking. Her wrap caught on something at the door's iron latch. She tugged it free and kept moving. 3 more steps into the alley before the smell reached her. Copper and cold air. She looked down. The hem of her wrap. The ivory fabric. She'd pressed that afternoon with her own hands. Dark. Wet. Ruined. She hadn't been touched. She wasn't hurt. The blood was not hers. And that was somehow so much worse, because it meant someone had stood right here, close enough to brush her doorway, and Ignazio's men had seen nothing. Or they had seen everything. Who did this belong to? And were they warning her or luring her? Hey, beautiful people, welcome back. And if you're new here, we are so glad you found us. Drop in the comments where you're watching from tonight, because this community spans everywhere from Georgia porches to California living rooms, and we love knowing you're out there. How are you doing? How's your heart? And if nobody's reminded you today, you deserve a story that respects your time. Hit that subscribe button if this is your first visit. We don't do filler here. We do real. Ignazio Colombo had not survived 41 years in this life by ignoring instincts. He'd ignored exactly one thing tonight, his phone, and he was already regretting it before his driver pulled through the social club gate and he saw the courtyard lights burning at full power when they should have been dimmed for a private dinner. Overhead lighting at full blast meant someone had hit the emergency panel. He was out of the car before it stopped moving. Enzo Battaglia, his head of security, broad-shouldered, 20 years loyal, a man who'd taken a knife for Ignazio's father once, was standing at the courtyard entrance with an expression Ignazio had never seen on him. Not fear, exactly. something closer to a man calculating how much truth he could afford to tell. Where is she? Not a question. Ignacio didn't ask questions when his chest felt like this. Inside, she's safe. Where is she? The kitchen. Indigo was sitting at the head of the long prep table, her wrap folded in front of her, the anniversary plate pushed to one side. She looked up when Ignacio walked in, and her face did something complicated. Relief and fury arriving at exactly the same time, neither one willing to step aside for the other. "You came," she said. 2 words. The weight of a whole silent evening packed inside them. Indigo. He crossed the kitchen in 6 steps and crouched in front of her chair, hands on her knees, eyes moving over her face, her neck, her arms. "Are you hurt? Tell me straight." "I'm not hurt." She nodded toward the folded wrap. "That's not mine." He looked at it. His jaw tightened. "Enzo." From the doorway, we found Sal at the end of the alley. He's alive. Unconscious, but alive. Whoever put him down didn't want him dead. They wanted him moved. Sal Ferreira, 24 years old, 2 years on Ignacio's detail. The kid who still brought Indigo pastries from his mother's bakery every Sunday because she'd once said she liked them. Someone had put him on the ground specifically to clear that alley. This wasn't a rival crew sending a message. Rivals left bodies. This was choreography. "They wanted me to walk out that door," Indigo said. She was watching Ignacio's face with the careful attention of a woman who had learned to read what he wouldn't say out loud. "They cleared the path. They put the blood right where I'd see it. They wanted me moving through that alley alone." The room went very still. Ignacio stood up slowly. His eyes went to Enzo. Enzo, who had been first on scene. Enzo, who had hit the emergency lights. Enzo, who was standing in that doorway right now with his hands clasped in front of him like a man in church. Who else had tonight's post-rotation? Enzo. A half-second pause, barely anything. But Ignacio had built an empire on half-second pauses. "I'll pull the schedule," Enzo said. "I didn't ask for the schedule. I asked who else had it." The anniversary plate caught the overhead light between them. 2 ceramic doves, facing each other, completely still. Indigo's hand moved to her belly, and Ignacio felt something shift behind his sternum that had nothing to do with anger. It was older than anger. It was the particular cold that arrives when a man realizes the danger was never outside his walls. It had been eating dinner at his table for years. Ignacio gave Enzo exactly one task before sending him out of the kitchen: pull every surveillance feed from the past 6 hours and have it on a laptop within 20 minutes. Enzo left without argument. That bothered Ignacio more than argument would have. A man with nothing to hide pushes back. He asks questions. He says, "Boss, what are you thinking?" A man managing his exposure walks out clean and quiet, buying himself time to decide what the footage will and won't show. Ignacio filed that away and turned back to Indigo. She was already watching him. She'd pulled her dark hair off her neck, a habit she had when she was thinking hard, and her eyes held that particular steadiness that had drawn him to her 4 years ago in the first place. Not softness, steadiness, the kind that doesn't flinch. "You need to eat something," he said. "Ignacio. The baby needs." "Ignacio." Her voice was quiet, but it landed like a hand flat on a table. "Sit down and talk to me like I'm your partner. Not your ward." He sat. Outside the kitchen window, he could hear his men moving through the courtyard. Low voices, footsteps, the mechanical click of someone checking a gate latch. His world reorganizing itself around a threat it hadn't yet named. That sound used to feel like security. Right now, it felt like a net he couldn't see the edges of. Someone on the inside moved those men, Indigo said. That's not a theory. That's the only explanation. Sal doesn't abandon his post for a stranger. Agreed. So whoever did this didn't just have access to tonight's rotation. She paused. They had access to me, my habits, the fact that I'd use that back door, the fact that I'd be alone because... She stopped herself. Because I wasn't here, Ignacio said. She didn't soften it for him. He didn't ask her to. 3 people knew the full details of tonight. He said, the location, the timing, the security layout. Enzo, my consigliere Rafael Lemuro, and my cousin Dario. Indigo was quiet for a moment. Dario brought me those flowers this afternoon. Said you asked him to. Ignacio had not asked Dario to bring anyone anything. He kept his face neutral through what felt like considerable effort. What kind of flowers? White roses. I thought it was sweet. Her eyes sharpened. You didn't send them. No. So he was here, in this building, this afternoon. She pressed her lips together. That's not a coincidence. No, Ignacio said again. It's not. The laptop arrived 7 minutes later, not 20, which meant Enzo had been moving fast, possibly too fast, possibly already knowing which files mattered. Ignacio opened the courtyard feed and scrolled back to 8:47 p.m. The alley camera showed Sal at his post, steady, professional. Then a figure approached from the interior corridor. Someone Sal clearly recognized. His whole body language shifted, shoulders dropping, chin lifting in easy greeting. Someone safe. Someone familiar. The figure's face was angled just enough away from the camera lens to be unreadable. But the jacket was distinctive. Charcoal gray, double-breasted, silver buttons. Ignacio had seen that jacket at his own dinner table 3 nights ago. He closed the laptop before Enzo, standing 6 feet away, could confirm whether he'd seen the same thing. Trust no one with what you know until you know who sold you out. That was his father's first rule. He'd stopped living by it somewhere between building an empire and believing the empire made him untouchable. Tonight was the tuition on that mistake. He looked at Indigo. She was reading his face the way she always did. Not pushing, just receiving. Waiting for him to decide whether he was going to let her in or lock her out again. For the first time in longer than he wanted to admit, he made the right choice. I need to tell you something, he said. And I need you to stay calm because you're 6 months along and I need both of you steady. Indigo folded her hands on the table. Talk? But before he could finish the name, the kitchen's back door swung open, and Dario Colombo stepped inside wearing a charcoal gray jacket with silver buttons, holding a phone out like a peace offering, smiling like a man who had absolutely nothing to fear. Dario Colombo was the kind of man who made you feel foolish for suspecting him. That was, Ignacio had always thought, his greatest gift. Warm eyes, easy laugh, the sort of face that belonged at a neighborhood barbecue rather than a backroom negotiation. He'd use that face to diffuse tensions that might have cost the family 3 wars over the years. Ignacio had called it an asset. He was reconsidering that assessment in real time. Cugino. Dario stepped into the kitchen with both hands visible. A habit men in this life developed early, and his eyes moved from Ignacio to Indigo and back with practiced concern. I heard there was an incident. I came as fast as I could. From where? Ignacio said. I was at Rafael's. We were going over the West Side accounts. Rafael's office or his house. A small pause. His house. Why? Ignacio said nothing. He had learned decades ago that silence was a better interrogation tool than any question. Silence made guilty people fill space. Innocent people waited. Dario filled space. Look, I know tonight was supposed to be private. I know I shouldn't even be here. But when Enzo called me, Enzo called you. Ignacio's voice stayed level. Enzo called you before he called me. The kitchen went quiet enough that the hum of the overhead light became audible. Dario's smile didn't disappear. It recalibrated, fractionally, almost invisibly, into something more careful. He thought you might need family around. That's all this is. Indigo spoke from her chair, her voice conversational, almost gentle. Dario, those white roses you brought me this afternoon. Where did you get them? That little shop on Carmine Street. You mentioned once you liked white roses, I thought. I mentioned that once, Indigo said. At a private dinner, in this kitchen, 8 months ago. She tilted her head. You have a very specific memory. The shift in Dario's expression was small, but Ignacio caught it. Something behind the eyes pulling back, retreating to a safer position. A man deciding how much rope he'd already used. Ignacio stood up from the table. He didn't move toward Dario. He didn't raise his voice. He simply stood at his full height in that kitchen and let the room reorganize itself around what was about to happen. You brought flowers to my pregnant wife using details from a private conversation, Ignacio said. You were in this building this afternoon. You know the post-rotation because you helped design it 3 years ago, and you got a call from my head of security before I did. He paused. Give me one reason those are coincidences. Dario's warm eyes went somewhere complicated. Not quite fear, something older. The expression of a man who had rehearsed a dozen versions of this moment and was discovering none of them fit. You've been distant with her for months, Dario said, and his voice had changed. The easy warmth stripped out of it, leaving something raw underneath. You built all of this, and you don't even see what's right in front of you. She deserves. Careful, Ignacio said quietly. Finish that sentence carefully. She deserves better than a man who treats her like furniture in his own house. Dario's jaw tightened. I wasn't going to hurt her. I would never. The blood was Sal's. It was just enough to... To what? Indigo's voice cut across the room like a cold draft. She was on her feet now, one hand on the table for balance, and her eyes held something Dario clearly hadn't accounted for. Not fragility, not gratitude, not the rescued woman's softness he'd apparently been expecting. To make me run? To make me think my husband had failed me so completely that I'd need someone else to catch me? Dario said nothing. You put a man on the ground, she continued. You cleared that alley. You left blood on my doorway at 6 months pregnant and called it care. She shook her head slowly. That's not love, Dario. That's possession wearing love's coat. The anniversary plate sat on the counter between them. 2 ceramic doves, neither one moving. Ignacio looked at his cousin, a man he trusted with schedules, with routes, with the kind of operational detail that could dismantle everything he'd built, and felt the specific grief of a betrayal that had been hiding in plain sight for years. He pulled out his phone, made one call. 4 words. Come get him now. But as Enzo's footsteps echoed down the corridor toward the kitchen, Ignacio's phone lit up with a message from Raffaele Muro that made his blood run cold. Dario didn't act alone. Check who signed off on the security redesign last spring. It goes higher than you think. Raffaele Muro had been Ignacio's consigliere for 11 years. He had sat at every table, heard every plan, signed off on every structural change to Colombo security, including the redesign last spring that had quietly repositioned 2 posts, rerouted 1 corridor camera, and created exactly the kind of blind spot that made tonight possible. Ignacio had approved that redesign without reading the full layout himself. He was done making that kind of mistake. He showed Indigo the message. She read it once, handed the phone back, and said nothing for a long moment. Outside, Dario was being walked to a car by 2 men who understood the assignment. His warm eyes and easy laugh were someone else's problem now. Raffaele came to my last midwife appointment, Indigo said quietly. Ignacio looked at her. He said you asked him to check on me, drive me there and back. She watched his face confirm what she already suspected. You didn't ask him either. No. So he's been building access. She sat back down, not from weakness, but the deliberate settling of a woman organizing her thoughts. Dario was the action. Raffaele was the architecture. One of them has feelings he never should have acted on, and one of them has ambitions he's been hiding in plain sight. Raffaele wants the family, Ignacio said. He always has. He just needed me destabilized enough that stepping in looked like rescue rather than theft. And Dario? Ignacio picked up the anniversary plate from the counter, turned it in his hands. The 2 painted doves, the careful detail of someone's patient work. Indigo had ordered this 8 months ago, had planned this evening, for months, had pressed her own dress and set this table and waited past 9 o'clock without a single word of complaint until complaint became unavoidable. He had been so busy guarding the empire that he'd left the heart of it completely unguarded. Dario convinced himself he was protecting you, Ignacio said. From me. He set the plate down gently. And the worst part is he wasn't entirely wrong about what needed protecting. He was just catastrophically wrong about who should do it. Indigo looked at the plate, then at him. You really weren't going to make it tonight, were you? She said, before the message. Before all of this, you were just not coming. The truth sat between them, uncomfortable and necessary. I told myself you were safe, he said. I told myself the walls were enough, that the men were enough. He paused. I told myself I'd make it up to you tomorrow. Ignacio. Her voice wasn't angry. That was almost harder to absorb than anger would have been. Tomorrow is a promise that belongs to people who don't live your life. He pulled a chair close and sat directly in front of her, not across the table, not at a managed distance, but close enough that she could see exactly what was on his face without having to interpret it. I know, he said. I know that now. Her hand rested on her belly. His eyes went there. To the quiet, insistent fact of the child they'd made, the future that was 6 months from arriving whether the empire was in order or not. He put his hand over hers. She didn't pull away. Outside, his phone was lighting up with updates. Raphael's location confirmed. 2 captains already moving. The situation contracting toward resolution the way Colombo situations always eventually did. The machine was working. The walls were closing. But in this kitchen, at this table, with this plate between them and her hand warm under his, something else was working too. Something slower and more important. Then Enzo appeared in the doorway, and his face carried news that made even the Raffaele situation look like a footnote. Enzo Battaglia did not scare easily. Ignacio had watched this man walk into rooms that made seasoned soldiers find reasons to wait outside. He had seen Enzo absorb bad news the way a seawall absorbs weather. Steady, impassive, built for exactly that purpose. The look on Enzo's face right now was none of those things. Raphael isn't at his house, Enzo said. He left 20 minutes before my men arrived. Took a bag, took his passport. A pause that carried considerable weight. And he took Carmela. Carmela Muro, Raffaele's daughter. 19 years old, quiet, studious, and Indigo's closest companion in the Colombo world. The one woman inside these walls who knew Indigo's schedule, her roots, her habits, the name of her midwife, the flowers she liked. The room rearranged itself. Carmela told him everything, Indigo said. Not a question. The kind of statement that arrives fully formed, when all the pieces suddenly face the same direction. We don't know if she did it willingly, Enzo said carefully. She's 19, and he's her father, Indigo replied. Whether it was willing or not, she's in danger now. Her eyes moved to Ignazio. He'll use her as leverage. That's what this was always building toward. Not tonight, not Dario. Tonight was the distraction. Raffaele needed you looking at your cousin while he walked out the back. Ignazio was already on his feet. The plan had been elegant in a way that made his teeth ache. Use Dario's genuine, misguided feelings as the visible threat. Let him confess. Let Ignazio feel the satisfaction of resolution. Meanwhile, Raffaele, patient and precise as a watchmaker, simply walked away with everything he needed to start over somewhere the Colombo name carried no authority. Except he'd taken his daughter, and that was a mistake. He loves her, Ignazio said, pulling on his jacket, which means he won't move fast. He'll want her comfortable, cooperative. He's not running, he's relocating. He looked at Enzo. Port or airport? Port, Enzo said. We already checked departures. Private charter, filed 40 minutes ago under a shell company we've seen before. Ferry terminal on the west side. He's got maybe a 30-minute window. 30 minutes. Ignazio turned to Indigo. This was the moment. The one that had defined every tension in their marriage for 3 years. The moment where the empire demanded his full attention, and she became the thing he'd get back to. The thing that could wait. The thing protected by walls and men, and the assumption that love didn't require his physical presence to survive. He looked at her for a long moment. I need you somewhere safe while I handle this, he said. Not because you can't handle yourself. Because if anything happened to you while I was 2 miles away, I would not survive it. And I mean that in the plainest possible way. Indigo studied him, reading, as always, for the difference between a man managing her and a man being honest with her. Carmela is my friend, she said. I know. Bring her back. That's the plan. She reached out and straightened his jacket collar. A small, deliberate gesture, the kind that belongs to people who have decided to keep choosing each other even when the reasons to stop are plentiful. Go, she said. And Ignazio. He stopped. Come back to me this time. Not to the Empire. To me. He held her eyes for 1 second longer than strictly necessary. Then he walked out into the night, with Enzo at his side, and the ferry terminal 30 minutes away, and 11 years of Raffaele Muro's quiet, patient betrayal finally running out of places to hide. What none of them knew yet, not Ignazio, not Enzo, not even Raffaele, was that Carmela Muro had not been taken at all. She had left a note, and that note was sitting on Indigo's phone as an unread message, sent 45 minutes ago, that began with 4 words, I can stop him. Indigo saw the message at 10:22 p.m. She read it 3 times. Then she called the number Carmela had sent it from, a number she didn't recognize, clearly a borrowed phone, and it rang twice before a voice answered, low and careful, with the particular quiet of someone speaking in a space where being overheard would be catastrophic. You got my message, Carmela said. Where are you? Ferry terminal. Westlot. He thinks I'm in the bathroom. A breath. Indigo, I need you to understand. I didn't know what he was planning. Not until tonight. He told me he just needed information about your schedule to keep you safe. I thought, her voice caught. I thought I was helping. Indigo closed her eyes briefly. 19 years old, trusting her father, handing over small details that felt like nothing and added up to everything. She knew exactly how that happened. She didn't have the luxury of being angry about it right now. Listen to me carefully, Indigo said. Ignacio is already coming. I need you to stay exactly where you are, and I need you to do one thing. What? Your father has a charter filed. Find out which dock. Silence. Then dock 7. I saw the paperwork in his bag when he packed. Good girl. Indigo was already typing a message to Enzo's number. Stay in that bathroom until you hear familiar voices. Do not come out for anyone else. Is my father going to... Carmela stopped. Started again. What happens to him? Indigo didn't insult her with a comfortable answer. That depends on what he does in the next 20 minutes. She hung up and sent Enzo the dock number before Carmela's borrowed phone had finished disconnecting. Dock 7 was the oldest structure at the ferry terminal. Narrow walkway, poor lighting, the kind of place that existed in the gap between municipal neglect and private convenience. Raffaele Muto stood at the far end of it with a duffel bag at his feet and 11 years of careful planning, about to board a charter that would take him somewhere the Colombo reach was theoretical rather than practical. He heard the footsteps when they were still 40 feet away. He turned. Ignacio walked out of the dock lighting alone. No visible men, no drawn weapons, nothing theatrical. Just a man in a jacket walking toward his consigliere of 11 years, with the particular unhurried pace of someone who has already decided how this ends. Raffaele's hand moved toward his bag. Don't. Ignacio said quietly, your daughter is safe. My men have the perimeter. And you are the only person in this situation whose outcome is still negotiable. He stopped 10 feet away. So let's talk like we used to. Before you decided my wife was an acceptable instrument. Raffaele straightened slowly. In the docklight, he looked older than he had 3 days ago at dinner. Or maybe Ignacio was simply seeing him clearly for the first time. You were going to lose everything anyway, Raphael said. The West Side captains are already looking for new leadership. Your marriage was hollowing out. The family was watching you choose the business over the bloodline every single day. He spread his hands. I wasn't destroying anything that wasn't already falling. And that made it acceptable to put my pregnant wife in a dark alley. That was Dario. That you engineered. Ignacio's voice stayed level. Using your daughter as your information source. Using my cousin's feelings as your cover story. Using 11 years of my trust as your master key. He took one step closer. You didn't just betray me, Raphael. You corrupted everyone around me to do it. That's not ambition. That's rot. Raffaele said nothing. Behind Ignacio, 3 men materialized from the shadows at the dock entrance. Quiet, professional, already positioned before the conversation started. The perimeter Ignacio had promised. Carmela had nothing to do with your choices, Ignacio said. She'll be treated accordingly. He paused. You raised a girl with better instincts than her father. That counts for something. Raphael's composure finally cracked. Not dramatically, not with rage, but with the specific grief of a man realizing the thing he thought he was building toward had collapsed before he ever reached it. What happens now? He said. Now, Ignacio said. You find out what 11 years of loyalty was actually worth to me. He nodded to his men. And then you spend a long time somewhere quiet, thinking about the difference between protecting a family and dismantling one, As his men moved forward and Raffaele stopped resisting, Ignazio's phone lit up. Indigo. One message. 2 words. Come home. Ignazio drove himself back. No driver. No escort. No calls to manage or fires to contain. Just the city moving past the windows at 11:30 at night, the streets quiet in the way that cities occasionally allow themselves, and the particular silence of a man who has handled what needed handling and is now faced with a harder thing. The thing waiting in a social club kitchen. He'd spent 11 years building infrastructure around the people he loved. Walls, men, protocols, contingencies, and called it protection. What it had actually been, he understood now, with uncomfortable clarity, was distance with good intentions. A way to feel responsible without being present. Care expressed entirely in the third person. Indigo had never asked for a fortress. She'd asked, in 100 small ways he'd chosen not to hear, for a husband. He parked outside the social club and sat for a moment with his hands on the wheel. Through the window, he could see the kitchen light still on, warm and yellow against the dark exterior, the most ordinary-looking thing in a night that had been anything but. Carmela was inside. Enzo had confirmed it 20 minutes ago. She'd come out of the bathroom the moment she heard his voice, and she'd been crying in the way people cry when relief and guilt arrive simultaneously, and neither one is willing to wait. Indigo had apparently sat with her for the past half hour, which was exactly the kind of thing Indigo did, and exactly the kind of thing Ignazio had never adequately appreciated. He went inside. The kitchen had been cleaned. Someone had removed the wrap, reset the table, restored the room to something approaching the evening Indigo had originally planned. The anniversary plate sat at the center of the table. 2 ceramic doves, still patient, still waiting. Carmela was asleep in a chair by the far wall, someone's jacket folded under her head. Enzo stood near the door, with the expression of a man who understood when his job was to be invisible. Indigo stood at the counter with a cup of tea going cold beside her. She looked at Ignazio when he walked in. He looked at her. The whole night passed between them in about 4 seconds without either of them saying a word. The empty chair, the ruined dress, the alley, the message, the dock, all of it. And underneath all of it, the longer story that had been building for 3 years of a man who kept choosing the Empire as his primary address. Raphael, she said. Handled. Carmela? Stays. She acted in good faith. She also helped end it. He paused. That matters. Indigo nodded slowly. Her eyes dropped to the anniversary plate, then came back up to his face. I made reservations for this dinner in January, she said. I picked the menu. I had the plate commissioned. I told myself you'd make it. A quiet exhale. I kept telling myself that right up until about 9:15. I know. I don't want an apology, Ignazio. Her voice was steady and direct and completely without performance. I've had apologies. They're very clean, and they don't change the pattern. She put one hand on her belly. Their daughter, 6 months along, entirely unaware of how close her arrival had come to being the thing that finally broke her parents apart. I want a different pattern. I want you to decide, genuinely decide, whether this family is where you live or just where you sleep. The kitchen was very quiet. Ignazio crossed to the counter. He stood in front of her. Close, present, no managed distance. And when he spoke without the careful calibration of a man protecting his position. I decided that on the dock, he said. When your message came through. He paused. 2 words, and I was already driving, not because the situation was resolved. Because you called and everything else stopped mattering. Her eyes searched his face, reading, as always, for the truth underneath the words. Whatever she found there made her exhale, slowly, fully, the way a person breathes when they put something heavy down after carrying it much longer than they should have. She didn't say anything. She just leaned forward and rested her head against his chest. He put his arms around her, carefully, fully, the way you hold something you nearly lost, and stood there in that kitchen that smelled like garlic and old, wood and decades of Sunday dinners, while Carmela slept in the corner and Enzo looked at the wall, and the anniversary plate sat between its two ceramic doves. But the night had one more thing to say, and it said it softly, the way the most important things always do. The night had one more thing to say. It said it at 11:47 p.m., in the form of a sound so small and so enormous that Ignazio felt it before he understood it, a flutter, distinct and insistent, against his palm where his hand rested on Indigo's belly. Their daughter? Moving. Indigo laughed. A real one. Surprised out of her, the kind that doesn't ask permission. She pulled back just enough to look at his face and found exactly what she needed there. Ignazio Colombo, who had built an empire on never showing what he felt, looking at his wife's stomach with an expression of complete and unguarded wonder. She's been doing that all evening, Indigo said softly, every time things got loud. Like she was reminding me she was still here. She has good timing, he said. She has your stubbornness. He laughed. A real one. The kitchen held it warmly. Final moral lesson. Survival without repair is just a slower kind of loss. But repair, chosen freely, is the bravest thing a person can build. In the corner, Carmela stirred awake. She looked at them both with swollen eyes and the expression of someone assembling the courage to speak. I'm sorry, she said, simply. No architecture around it. Indigo looked at her the way she'd looked at Ignazio on the dock, searching for the truth underneath. She found what she expected, a young woman who had loved her father and been used by him and would be carrying that for a very long time. I know, Indigo said. We'll figure out the rest later. Tonight you're safe, and that's enough. Carmela pressed her lips together and nodded and looked at her hands. Enzo excused himself quietly, a man who had spent the night walking a careful line between loyalty and suspicion, and who would be having a very direct conversation with Ignazio tomorrow about the 11 seconds of hesitation that had nearly cost everything. He knew it. Ignazio knew it. That conversation would happen in daylight, professionally, without tonight's weight on it. Some things deserved their own clean moment. Ignazio sat down at the anniversary table. He pulled the chair out beside him, not across, not at the managed distance of a man conducting a dinner, but right beside him close, and looked at Indigo until she came and sat in it. He picked up the anniversary plate, turned it in his hands one more time, the two ceramic doves facing each other, painted with the patient detail of someone who believed the people receiving it were worth that kind of care. You commissioned this in January, he said. I did. 8 months ago, you were already planning to make tonight mean something? I'm an optimist, she said. It's a character flaw. He set the plate down between them carefully. It's the best thing about you. She looked at him sideways. Top 5, maybe. He reached across the table and took her hand. Not dramatically, not as a gesture for anyone watching, just the simple, deliberate act of a man choosing where his hands belonged. I want to tell you something, he said, and I want you to know I'm not saying it because tonight was hard, or because I almost lost you, or because I'm standing in the wreckage of my own mistakes. He paused. I'm saying it because it's true on an ordinary Tuesday, and I haven't been saying it nearly enough. Indigo waited. You are the thing I built all of this for, he said. Not the walls, not the name, you and her. His eyes dropped briefly to her belly, then came back up. And I have been living like the empire was the point, and you were the reward I'd get to eventually. I'm done living like that. The kitchen held the silence respectfully. Outside, the city continued its late-night business, indifferent, unhurried, entirely unaware that in an old social club kitchen on a Wednesday in autumn, a marriage had been cracked open and examined honestly for the first time and found, underneath all the damage, still worth keeping. Indigo squeezed his hand. "Then come home tomorrow," she said, on time. "For no reason except that we're there." "Yes," he said. Not, "I will try." Not, "I'll do better." Just yes. Clean and direct and completely without qualification. The way a man speaks when he has finally stopped negotiating with the truth. The anniversary plate sat between them. Two ceramic doves, facing each other, exactly as they had been all evening, through the empty chair and the ruined dress and the dark alley and the dock and all the years of distance that had preceded all of it. Patient, steady, still there. Some things, it turns out, are built to outlast the worst night you can throw at them. And that, beautiful people, is exactly the kind of love worth fighting for. Not perfect love. Not easy love. Love that gets cracked open on a Wednesday night and chooses with full information to stay anyway. Drop a in the comments if this story reminded you of someone you love or someone you needed to call tonight. And if you're watching this alone, let me tell you something. The fact that you stayed all the way to the end tells me everything about the kind of heart you have. Subscribe if you haven't already, because we have more stories where this one came from, and none of them will waste your time. We'll see you in the next one. Take care of yourselves and take care of each other.